A single tear glistened like a fallen star on Nora Faye's cheek, stopping Theo Grayson dead in Willowbrook's bustling craft fair. The 30-year-old billionaire, clutching his father's engraved ruler, felt his hollow world crack. Beside a half-built miniature playhouse, 9-year-old Nora held a sign. Need a partner for the fairy tale house contest. Her late father's sketchbook, alive with intricate dreams, mirrored Theo's buried passion for craftsmanship. Could a child's plea mend a broken heart? Subscribe, share where you're tuning in from, and uncover if one tiny house can build a family or shatter everything. The late summer sun bathed Willowbrook's craft fair in a golden glow, its light weaving through stalls draped in burlap and strung with fairy lights, where the air hummed with the clink of chisels and the scent of cedarwood. Theo Grayson, 30, fair-skinned with dark hair tousled by the breeze, stood at the edge of the town square, a stranger in a world pulsing with creation. A billionaire heir, his wealth felt like a hollow crown, built on financial empires but not the dreams of his late father, Elliot Grayson, a master craftsman whose miniature architectural models had once spun stories from wood and wire. Theo's fingers brushed the engraved wooden ruler in his pocket, its worn edges a tether to a past he couldn't reclaim. He'd come to this small town seeking solace, a whisper of meaning to fill the void of boardrooms and empty victories. The fair thrummed with life. Artisans laughed, their hands stained with paint, while children darted through the crowd, clutching woven trinkets. Theo's polished shoes sank into the grass as he wandered, unnoticed, his green eyes scanning the stalls. His father's workshop flickered in his mind, sawdust dancing in sunlight, each model a world of its own. He hadn't carved since Elliot's heart stopped, leaving Theo with a fortune but no fire. The ruler, etched with his father's name, was all that remained, a silent promise he'd failed to keep. Then he saw her, a girl no more than 9, sitting alone at a folding table near the park's edge. Nora Faye, fair-skinned with light brown hair tied in a loose braid, her blue eyes shimmering with tears that caught the sun like dew on glass. Before her stood a half-built miniature playhouse, its wooden arches delicate yet incomplete, a skeleton of artistry that whispered genius. A cardboard sign, propped against the table, declared in bold marker, "Need a partner for the fairy tale house contest." Knowledge of structure and diorama are a plus. The words struck Theo like a spark, igniting memories of his father's meticulous blueprints, each line a story untold. Nora wiped her cheek with a trembling hand, her gaze fixed on the passing crowd. Potters, weavers, families, who hurried by without a glance. Theo's chest tightened, recognizing the fragile hope in her eyes, stretched thin like thread about to snap. He stepped closer, his shadow falling across the table. Nora's eyes flicked up, sharp and wary, her pale fingers clutching a worn sketchbook. "You're not here for the money, are you?" Theo asked, his voice soft, a smile tugging at his lips. Nora tilted her head, her blue eyes narrowing with a mix of defiance and wit. "Nope. Can you handle a saw, mister? Or just sign checks?" Her words, sharp for a child, carried a challenge that made Theo chuckle, easing the weight in his heart. He knelt, his tailored navy jacket brushing the grass, bringing his green eyes level with hers. "I've swung a saw a time or two. What's this contest about?" Nora's face softened, though her tears lingered. She opened the sketchbook, revealing pages of intricate designs, gabled roofs, stained glass windows, a chandelier like a cluster of stars. "It's the fairy tale house contest," she said, her voice steadying. "You build a tiny house, magical but real. My dad started this one." Her fingers traced a drawing, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He was an architect. He didn't finish it." Theo's throat tightened, the sketchbook a mirror to his father's work, every line precise, alive with intent. "Your dad had a gift," he said, his voice low, reverent. "This is beautiful." He saw his younger self in Nora, trailing his father through sawdust, dreaming of worlds in miniature. The ruler in his pocket seemed to pulse, urging him forward. "He said every house needs a heart," Nora murmured, her eyes on the playhouse's unfinished roof. gaping like an open wound. I want to finish it for him, but I can't do it alone. Mom's too busy. I'm Theo, he said, meeting her gaze. I'd like to help, if you'll let me. Nora studied him, her blue eyes searching for sincerity. You know dioramas? Enough to try, Theo said, grinning. Show me what's next. She hesitated, then slid the sketchbook toward him, pointing to a chandelier design. Dad wanted lights that glow like stars. Her voice held fragile hope, testing if Theo would stay or fade like the crowd. He took the book, his heart racing with purpose. But as he studied the plans, a figure approached. A woman with fair skin and auburn hair, her sharp eyes framed by an apron dusted with lacquer. Rose Camden, Nora's mother, stood with arms crossed, her gaze piercing. What does a billionaire want with my daughter's dream? The echo of Rose Camden's piercing gaze lingered in Theo Grayson's mind as he stepped into Jean's clock shop, where the air thrummed with the soft ticking of countless clocks, a heartbeat woven into the walls of Willowbrook. The craft fair's vibrant hum faded behind him, but Nora Faye's sketchbook, clutched in his fair-skinned hands, anchored him to a new purpose. Her plea, need a partner for the fairy tale house contest, had sparked something dormant, a flicker of his father's craftsmanship that Theo thought lost. Nora, her light brown braids swaying, stood by the half-built playhouse, her blue eyes bright with cautious hope. Rose's unspoken question, what does a billionaire want with my daughter's dream, hung like a shadow, urging Theo to prove his heart. Jean, his fair skin framed by white hair, greeted them with a nod, his eyes twinkling under the shop's brass lamps. This place hasn't seen such a project since your father, Theo, he said, his voice warm as aged wood. The shop was a sanctuary of gears and polished oak, clocks pulsing like the soul of time itself. Nora set the playhouse on a worn workbench, its delicate arches glowing faintly, an unfinished dream of her late architect father. Theo traced its gabled edge, his green eyes tracing lines that mirrored his father's models. Your dad's work is alive here, he said, glancing at Nora. He said every nail holds a dream, Nora replied, her fair cheeks flushing with pride, her voice steady despite the grief beneath. She opened the sketchbook to a chandelier design, its stars sketched with care. This is next. Can you make it glow like Dad wanted? Theo's heart stirred, memories of his father wiring tiny lamps in their workshop flooding back. Let's find out, he said, rolling up the sleeves of his white shirt, his tailored jacket set aside. They began, Nora sorting glass beads with small, precise hands, while Theo carved a walnut frame, his movements deft yet reverent. The shop's rhythm, ticks, tocks, the whisper of sandpaper, enveloped them like a cocoon. Nora hummed a tune about starry skies, weaving a story for the playhouse's family. This is Mira, the mom who paints sunsets, she said, pointing to an empty space where a figurine would stand. She lives with Lila, her daughter, who loves stars. Theo smiled, threading a wire through a bead. What does Lila dream of? Building things like her dad, Nora said, her blue eyes flickering with loss. Like me. The words landed softly, piercing Theo's chest. He saw himself at her age, trailing his father through sawdust, dreaming of worlds in miniature. He handed her a pair of tweezers. Let's make Lila's stars shine. They worked in tandem, shaping a chandelier that flickered to life, casting golden specks across the workbench. Each piece, a tiny chair, a painted mural, felt like a step toward mending something broken, a bridge between their paths. Hours melted away, the clocks marking their shared silence and laughter. Nora's giggle, bright as the chandelier's glow, filled the shop as she named another character. Jasper, the dad who builds bridges. Theo paused, his father's ruler heavy in his pocket. My dad built bridges too, he said, his voice low. In his own way. Nora tilted her head, curious, but before she could ask, the shop's door creaked open. Rose Camden stepped inside, her fair skin framed by auburn hair, her apron dusted with lacquer from her restoration work. Her sharp eyes softened as they landed on Theo, who was placing a miniature book on a shelf with tweezers, his focus mirroring her own craft. The playhouse, sprouting new details, glowed with life. You're still here, she said, her voice a mix of surprise and appraisal. Didn't plan on leaving, Theo replied, meeting her gaze with quiet resolve. Nora's vision deserves to be finished. Rose's lips twitched, not quite a smile. Vision's one thing, staying is another. She brushed the playhouse's frame, her fingers tracing her late husband's artistry. He put his soul into this. So will we, Theo said, his voice firm but kind, the ruler in his pocket a silent vow. Jean, polishing a clock, cleared his throat. Rose, Theo's got his father's hands. Elliot Grayson built a lighthouse model so real, you'd swear it lit the sea. This one's no different. His words wove a thread between past and present, softening Rose's edges. Her gaze wavered, skepticism cracking like thin glass. She watched Nora paint a tiny window, her fair cheeks flushed with purpose. We'll see, Rose said, her voice holding a new note. Curiosity, perhaps trust. She turned to leave, pausing at the door. Don't break her heart, Theo. Nora looked up, her blue eyes searching. You won't, right? She asked, her voice small but piercing. Theo knelt, his hand on the sketchbook. Not a chance, Nora. We're in this together. She smiled, but Rose's warning echoed. As they returned to work, a shadow loomed outside. Richard, Nora's uncle, his fair face etched with unease. Would his protective heart challenge their fragile bond? The soft ticking of Jean's clock shop enveloped Theo Grayson like a pulse. But Rose Camden's parting words, "Don't break her heart," cast a shadow over the workbench where the playhouse stood, its tiny chandelier casting starry flecks across the oak. Theo, his fair skin dusted with sawdust, carved a miniature railing, his green eyes focused yet haunted by Rose's challenge. Nora Fay, her fair cheeks flushed with purpose, painted a tiny door, her light brown braids swaying as she hummed about bridges and stars. The playhouse, alive with her late father's designs, was a fragile testament to their shared dreams. But Rose's doubt and the looming presence of Nora's uncle, Richard, weighed on Theo's heart. His fingers brushed the engraved ruler in his pocket, his father's legacy urging him to prove his worth beyond wealth. Nora glanced up, her blue eyes sparkling with hope. Will Mom like the door? She asked, holding up a sapphire-hued panel no larger than a coin. It's for Lila's room. Theo smiled, setting the railing on the playhouse's porch. If it's as good as your dad's sketches, she'll be amazed. His voice was warm, but Rose's warning echoed, her auburn-haired silhouette lingering in his mind. She saw him as a billionaire outsider, not a craftsman honoring a shared past. The ruler, etched with his father's name, felt heavier, a reminder of promises he meant to keep. The shop's door creaked open, admitting a gust of summer air, and a man whose broad frame filled the entrance. Richard Camden, Nora's uncle, stepped inside, his fair skin tanned from outdoor work, his brown hair tousled under a worn cap. His eyes, warm but shadowed with guilt, softened at Nora's grin, but sharpened when they landed on Theo. Nora, you didn't say you'd be here again, he said, his voice a low rumble, protective yet strained. Nora bounded over, hugging his waist. Uncle Richard, Theo's helping with Dad's house. Look at the chandelier. It glows. She pointed proudly, but Richard's gaze lingered on Theo, his jaw tight, as if measuring an intruder in his family's story. Theo stood, wiping sawdust from his hands, his white shirt speckled with wood shavings. Theo Grayson, he introduced, offering a hand. Richard shook it, his grip firm, almost a challenge. Richard Camden, Rose's brother. The pause was thick, the clocks ticking, amplifying the tension. Before Theo could respond, Rose entered, her fair skin framed by auburn hair, her apron dusted with lacquer from her restoration work. Her sharp eyes flicked from Nora to Theo, then to Richard, sensing the unease. Nora, you skipped lunch, she said, holding a paper bag, her voice steady but probing. What's going on, Richard? Just checking in, Richard replied, his tone clipped. Didn't know we had a city craftsman stepping in. His words carried a sting, not hostility but fear. Fear of losing his place in Nora's heart, a role he'd clung to since her father's death. Theo recognized that ache, the hollow left when his own father's workshop was sold, leaving only the ruler. Nora tugged Richard's sleeve. Theo's good, Uncle Richard. He listens to Dad's drawings. Her trust was a quiet force, softening the room's edges. But Richard's shoulders stiffened, his eyes on the playhouse as if it held memories too heavy to share. Rose stepped closer, her gaze softening as she studied the playhouse's new details. The glowing chandelier, the painted door. "It's beautiful," she admitted, her voice quieter, her fingers brushing the frame, feeling her husband's artistry. "But Nora's been let down before. Promises break." "I don't break promises," Theo said, meeting her eyes, his green gaze steady. "Nora's vision deserves to be finished." His voice held the weight of his father's lessons, the ruler a silent vow. Jean, polishing a clock's brass face, cleared his throat. "Rose, Theo's got Elliot Grayson's hands. Built a lighthouse model so real, it could have guided ships. This one's cut from the same cloth." His words wove a bridge between past and present, easing Rose's doubt. Her expression wavered, like sunlight breaking through clouds. She watched Nora, whose blue eyes gleamed as she painted, her fair cheeks flushed with purpose. "Prove it, Theo," Rose said, her voice firm but tinged with curiosity. "No money, no shortcuts. Just your hands and time, here in Jean's shop under his watch." "Deal," Theo said, his heart pounding with resolve. "I'm in." Richard frowned, his protective instincts bristling, his silence louder than words. Nora handed Theo a tiny paintbrush, her smile bright. "Let's make Lila's room next," she said, her voice full of possibility. As they resumed work, the clocks ticked on, marking the fragile start of trust. But outside, Richard lingered, his fair face etched with unease, his footsteps heavy with unspoken fears. Would his need to protect Nora shatter the delicate world they were building? The ticking of Jean's clock shop, once a soothing rhythm, now pulsed like a warning as Theo Grayson and Nora Fay worked under the shadow of Rose Camden's challenge. No money, only skill. The playhouse, perched on the workbench, glowed with delicate details, a chandelier scattering starry glints, a sunset mural warm with life. But Richard's uneasy presence from the previous day lingered, his protective frown a silent storm. Theo, his fair skin dusted with sawdust, sanded a tiny porch railing, his green eyes steady but troubled. The engraved ruler in his pocket, a quiet tether to his father's legacy. Nora, her light brown braids swaying, painted a miniature window, her blue eyes flickering with a restless edge, as if sensing an unseen fracture. As the afternoon sun slanted through the shop's windows, Nora reached for the playhouse's heart, a hand-carved walnut figurine of her father, its gentle smile etched with love. It was meant to stand in the central room, a beacon of her dad's dream. Her fingers froze, her fair cheeks paling. "Theo," she whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice. "It's gone." The words pierced the air, sharp and raw, as she stared at the empty room, its absence a gaping wound in the playhouse's soul. Theo's heart plummeted. He joined her, his eyes scanning the barren space where the figurine should have stood. "It can't be," he murmured, but the truth stared back, cold and unyielding. Nora's blue eyes welled, her small hands clutching her father's sketchbook like a lifeline. "It's like losing Dad again," she said, each syllable trembling with grief. Theo knelt beside her, his own loss echoing, his father's workshop, stripped bare after his death, leaving only the ruler. "We'll find it," he promised, his voice steady despite the ache. They searched the workbench, the shelves, the shadowed corners of the shop, but found nothing. Then Nora gasped, her fingers brushing a splinter of walnut caught in a crack near the door, its grain matching the figurines. "This is his," she said, her voice a mix of hope and dread, her pale hand trembling as she held it up. Theo's stomach twisted. The splinter's location pointed across the street to Richard's workshop, where he repaired furniture. Richard's fear, losing his place in Nora's life, flashed in Theo's mind. Could he have taken it? The thought stung, but the evidence was undeniable. "Nora, stay with Jean," Theo said, his tone calm but firm. "I'll check outside." Her blue eyes pleaded for answers, but she nodded, clutching the sketchbook. Theo stepped into Willowbrook's fading light, the craft fair's distant hum a faint echo. Richard's workshop, a weathered shed spilling sawdust, stood quiet. Theo hesitated, his hand brushing the ruler. His father's words surfaced. A house is only real if built with heart. A call to a tech firm could produce a 3D printed replica by morning, perfect but soulless, breaking his promise to Rose and Nora. He chose truth over convenience, his resolve firm. Inside, Richard sanded a chair, his fair skin taut with distraction, his brown hair tucked under a cap. Tools cluttered the workbench, but Theo's green eyes caught a glint in an open drawer. A walnut figurine, its carved face unmistakably Nora's father. His heart raced, but he steadied himself, choosing empathy over confrontation. "Richard," he began, his voice low, "I lost my dad's blueprints when his workshop was sold. It felt like losing him twice. You ever feel that kind of emptiness?" Richard's sandpaper stilled, his brown eyes meeting Theo's, shadowed with guilt. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice cracking, betraying him. "Nora's figurine," Theo said softly. "It's her dad's heart in that house. It's missing, and we found a splinter by your shop." He gestured to the drawer, his gaze kind but unwavering. "If you know something, tell me. For her." Richard's shoulders slumped, his face crumpling like weathered oak. He reached into the drawer, lifting the figurine with trembling hands. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he whispered, tears glinting on his fair cheeks. "I was scared she'd forget him. Forget me." The confession hung heavy, a wound laid bare. Theo waited, the shop's silence amplifying Richard's pain. His fear of being replaced had driven him to hide Nora's father's memory. But at what cost? Could Theo bridge this gap without breaking the fragile trust they'd built? The air in Richard Camden's workshop hung heavy with sawdust and guilt. The walnut figurine of Nora Faye's father lying exposed in an open drawer. Its carved smile a silent accusation. Theo Grayson stood across from Richard, his fair skin taut with resolve, his green eyes steady but kind. The splinter Nora found, proof of Richard's desperate act, had led Theo here. But it was empathy, not blame, that shaped his words. The craft fair's distant hum faded, replaced by the ticking urgency of the fairy tale house contest. Back in Jean's shop, Nora waited, her blue eyes clouded with the fear of losing her father's memory again. Theo's hand brushed the engraved ruler in his pocket, his father's legacy urging him to heal, not harm. Richard's hands shook, the sandpaper he'd held falling to the workbench. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he whispered, his brown eyes glistening, his fair cheeks flushed with shame. "I saw her with you, Theo, and it felt like I was losing her. Losing him." His voice broke, the figurine a painful echo of his brother-in-law, Nora's father. "Every time she talks about that house, he's alive. But you're here now, and I'm just the uncle." Theo's chest ached. Memories of his father's workshop, sold off, leaving only the ruler, stirring. "I know that emptiness," he said softly. "When my dad died, his blueprints were gone. It felt like losing him twice. Nora's house keeps her dad alive, Richard. You're part of that. You don't have to hide him to hold on." His words, gentle but firm, cut through the silence, the ruler a quiet vow to bridge their pain. Richard's shoulders slumped, tears tracing his fair skin. He lifted the figurine, its walnut grain warm in his trembling hands. "I thought hiding it would keep her close to me," he confessed, his voice barely audible. "I was wrong." He handed it to Theo, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. "Take it to her. Tell her I'm sorry." Theo took the figurine, its weight grounding him. "Come with me," he said, his tone unwavering. "Tell her yourself. She needs her uncle." Richard hesitated, his guilt a heavy shroud, but Theo's steady gaze offered a path to redemption. In Jean's clock shop, the ticking seemed to pause as Theo and Richard entered. Nora sat by the playhouse, her fair skin pale, her light brown braid loose, clutching her father's sketchbook. Her blue eyes widened at Richard's presence, then narrowed, hurt flashing across her face. "Uncle Richard?" she asked, her voice sharp with betrayal. "Did you take it?" Richard knelt, his brown eyes meeting hers, the figurine in his hands. "I did, Nora," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I was scared you'd forget your dad. Forget me. I'm so sorry." He placed the figurine in her hands, its smile glowing in the lamplight. Nora's fingers traced it, tears brimming but held back, her silence louder than words. Theo knelt beside her, his green eyes soft. Your dad's heart is in this house, Nora, but so is yours. And Richard's. What if we add him to the family? He gestured to the playhouse, its rooms nearly complete, a testament to their shared effort. Let's carve a figurine for Uncle Richard. Nora's eyes sparked, hope cutting through her pain. Really? She asked, glancing at Richard, who nodded, his fair face softening. I'd like that, he said, his voice thick with relief. Jean, his white hair aglow, handed Theo a walnut block and a carving knife. Show him, Theo, he said, his fair skin creased with a knowing smile. Like your dad taught you. Theo guided Richard's hands, their movements awkward at first, then steady as they shaped a figure in flannel, a kind face to stand beside Nora's father. Nora watched, sketching a flannel-clad figure in her sketchbook, her hum a melody of healing. The shop filled with the scrape of knives and the ticking of clocks, a rhythm of renewal. Rose entered, her fair skin framed by auburn hair, her apron dusted with lacquer. Her sharp eyes softened at the sight of the playhouse, now whole, and the new figurine in Richard's hands. You're all still here, she said, her voice warmer, her trust growing. You kept your word, Theo. For Nora, Theo replied, meeting her gaze. For all of us. Nora placed her father's figurine back in the central room, then handed Richard's to him. This is your spot, she said, her smile a quiet forgiveness. The playhouse glowed, its heart restored, ready for the contest. But as they polished its final details, the looming deadline pressed closer. Could their unity withstand the judge's gaze, or would new shadows test their fragile bond? The fairy lights of Willowbrook's craft fair twinkled like stars, casting a golden glow over the town square as the fairy tale house contest began, its energy pulsing through the summer night. Theo Grayson stood in Jean's clock shop, his fair skin warmed by lamplight, his green eyes fixed on the playhouse that had become their heart's work. The restored figurine of Nora Faye's father, alongside the new one for Uncle Richard, stood proudly in its central room, their walnut faces glowing beside a chandelier, scattering starry flecks. The reconciliation in Richard's workshop had healed old wounds, but the contest loomed, a test of their fragile unity. Nora, her light brown braid catching the light, polished a tiny porch, her blue eyes dancing with nervous excitement. Rose Camden and Richard stood nearby, their fair faces softened by pride. But Theo's hand brushed the engraved ruler in his pocket, his father's legacy whispering. Could their bond shine under the judge's gaze? The fair buzzed with life, artisans' laughter, children's chatter, the scent of cedar wood weaving through the air. Theo carried the playhouse to the exhibition tent, Nora skipping beside him, clutching her father's sketchbook. Rose, her auburn hair framing her fair skin, adjusted her lacquer-dusted apron, her sharp eyes now warm with trust. Richard, in a clean flannel shirt, hauled a toolbox, his brown hair tucked under a cap. His role as technical crew, a quiet redemption. Jean, his white hair aglow, followed, his fair face creased with a knowing smile. The tent hummed with competitors, children with painted dollhouses, artisans with grand models. But Nora's playhouse stood apart, its delicate arches and glowing lamps a testament to love. The judges, 3 local artisans, moved through the tent, their clipboards sharp with scrutiny. Theo's heart raced as they approached, Nora's small hand gripping his, her fair skin flushed. The head judge, a stern woman with gray hair, studied the playhouse, her pen hovering. Fine craftsmanship, she said, her tone measured. But what's the story behind it? Her question echoed Rose's earlier challenge, testing Theo's commitment beyond skill. Nora stepped forward, her blue eyes steady despite trembling hands. This is our house, she began, her voice clear, carrying her father's dreams. She pointed to each figurine, her braids swaying. This is Mira, the mom who paints sunsets, like my mom, Rose. Rose's breath caught, her hand finding Theo's, her fair fingers warm. This is Jasper, the dad who built bridges, like my dad dreamed. Her voice wavered, but she pressed on. This is Lila, their daughter, who loves stars. That's me. And this, she lifted Richard's figurine, her eyes meeting his. This is Uncle Richard, who keeps us safe. The tent fell silent, the crowd leaning in, spellbound. A young girl, her fair hair in pigtails, piped up, "Is that house real?" Nora's gaze softened, her answer a quiet flame. "Yes, because our family is." Theo's throat tightened, memories of his father's workshop, sawdust in sunlight, blending with Nora's words. Rose wiped a tear, her auburn hair catching the light, and Richard's brown eyes shone, his guilt replaced by belonging. The head judge's sternness melted, her voice thick. "You've given this house a soul." A carpenter judge nodded, his weathered face softening. "It's not the grandest, but it's alive." The crowd stirred, a few clapping, their doubts fading. A boy pointed at the chandelier, whispering, "Can we see the lights again?" Nora grinned, flicking a switch, and the playhouse glowed, its starry beams dancing across the tent, drawing gasps. As the judges deliberated, Theo knelt beside Nora. "You were brilliant," he whispered, his green eyes proud. She beamed, clutching the sketchbook. "We did it together." Rose joined them, her voice soft. "You both did." Richard, polishing a railing, nodded, his fair face warm with acceptance. The judges returned, their voices cutting through the tense hum. "For technical skill, the Willowbrook Prize," the head judge announced, gesturing to a towering castle model. Applause followed, but she continued. "For the heart of the house, we honor Nora Fay and her team." A roar erupted, shaking the tent. Nora gasped, throwing her arms around Theo, then Rose, then Richard, their embrace a fortress of love. The playhouse, a symbol of their journey, stood proud as families admired it. A girl asking Nora to show the tiny windows, sparking more cheers. Theo felt his father's ruler pulse, as if Elliot were clapping too. But as the fair's lights dimmed, he glanced at Jean's shop, its ticking heart now a beacon of possibility. Could this victory build something greater, a legacy for all of Willowbrook? The starry glow of Willowbrook's craft fair had faded, but the triumph of the fairy tale house contest lingered like a warm ember in Theo Grayson's heart. The playhouse, crowned with the Heart of the House Award, stood proudly in Jean's clock shop, its walnut figurines, Mira, Jasper, Lila, and Uncle Richard, gleaming under lamplight, a testament to the family forged through Nora Fay's vision. Theo, his fair skin warmed by the shop's golden light, brushed the engraved ruler in his pocket, his father's legacy no longer a burden, but a guiding star. Nora, her light brown braid catching the glow, adjusted a tiny window, her blue eyes bright with purpose. Rose, Camden, and Richard, their fair faces softened by unity, stood nearby, but Theo's gaze drifted to the shop's ticking heart, sensing a greater legacy stirring. Could their victory build something lasting for all of Willowbrook? Autumn swept into the town, dusting the streets with golden leaves and a crisp promise of change. Theo, no longer the polished billionaire, wore a flannel shirt, his dark hair tousled, his hands calloused from carving. He'd abandoned boardrooms for sawdust, pouring his wealth and heart into transforming Jean's shop into the Heritage Craft Workshop, a free haven where children could learn woodworking, painting, and restoration. The shop's clocks still ticked, their rhythm now joined by children's laughter and the scrape of tools. Nora, her fair cheeks flushed, led a group of kids in crafting miniature doors, her confidence a quiet flame. Rose, her auburn hair framing her fair skin, taught restoration, her sharp eyes now warm with purpose. Richard, his brown hair tucked under a cap, guided teens in carving, his fair face aglow with redemption. The workshop's grand opening was set for a brisk Saturday, a community exhibition to showcase the children's creations. Theo hammered a sign above the door, Heritage Craft Workshop, its carved letters echoing the playhouse's care. Inside, tables brimmed with models, bridges, lighthouses, tiny houses, each a spark of Willowbrook's young dreamers. The playhouse, displayed on a velvet-draped table, drew gasps, its chandelier casting starry flecks. Nora adjusted the figurine of her father, her blue eyes soft. "Think Dad would love this?" she asked, her voice a blend of hope and pride. Theo knelt, his green eyes meeting hers. He'd be proud, Nora. You've built more than a house. You've built a home. Her smile, radiant as the contest night, warmed him, but a flicker of doubt lingered. Could he, once an outsider, truly belong? Rose approached, carrying cedar-scented cookies, her fair skin glowing. "You've done more than I dreamed, Theo," she said, her voice soft but direct. "This place lives because of you." Her gaze held a spark, kindled through late-night talks over workshop plans, a quiet promise growing between them. Theo's heart stirred, not just for Nora, but for Rose, whose strength mirrored his own. The exhibition buzzed as townsfolk poured in, their boots crunching autumn leaves. Children displayed their models. A girl's painted bridge, inspired by Nora's stories. A boy's lighthouse, echoing Theo's father's work. Richard, guiding a teen through a carving demo, caught Theo's eye and nodded, their bond sealed. Jean, his white hair aglow, stood by the playhouse, telling visitors, "A girl's dream started this. A man's heart carried it forward." Nora tugged Theo's sleeve, clutching a folded poem. "Can I read it?" she asked, her fair cheeks flushed. Theo nodded, his throat tight. She stepped onto a stool, her voice clear. "This house isn't just wood," she began. "It's Mom fixing broken things, Dad dreaming big, me loving stars, and Uncle Richard keeping us safe. Family isn't just blood, it's who shows up." The crowd fell silent, then erupted in applause. Rose's auburn hair catching tears, Richard's brown eyes shining. A woman approached Theo, her voice soft. "Your daughter's a gift." He didn't correct her, the word daughter settling like a warm hearth. Rose handed him a wooden box, her fair fingers brushing his. "Open it later," she whispered, her smile a vow. That evening, in Rose and Nora's modest home, the playhouse glowed on the mantel. Theo opened the box, revealing a carved figurine of himself, flannel-clad, crafted by Rose. "You belong here," she said, her voice steady. Nora, curled on the couch, grinned. "You're our story now, Theo." He placed the figurine beside the others, his heart full. As lamplight danced, Theo saw his father's ruler in a new light. Not a relic, but a cornerstone of a home built with love. Willowbrook's stars shone outside, whispering of new chapters. Their family, crafted through care, was real, and the legacy they'd built would endure. Theo, Nora, and Rose's journey in Willowbrook weaves a soulful tale of family crafted through love and legacy. What did this story spark in you? Drop your thoughts below. Share where you're listening from and how their bond touched your heart. Your voice adds to this tapestry. Thank you for joining us on July 24th, 2025 at 3:46 p.m. Your presence makes these stories glow. Subscribe for more tales that warm the soul, and we'll meet again under Willowbrook stars, where every heart builds a home.